Hi everyone, I am Avery. Welcome to my channel. I'm a Chinese Christian who moved from China to Europe a year ago, and now I'm writing about theology full time. I never imagined I would start a podcast in this way. My original plan was to publish my two theological books first, but now, because of the YuMenglong case, I can no longer continue with that plan. I won't go into the details of the case here. If you are unfamiliar, please search for it. However, I want to first call upon the informed friends to translate first-hand materials into different languages. I know some are already doing this, but much of it is AI-generated content. That kind of fast food sentimentality lacks any weight. In the Chinese version of content, I also called for translating the cases of Qiao Renliang, Qiu Fo, and all related innocent deaths. YuMenglong's case is not an isolated case, it represents a pattern. It is necessary for us to transform from an independent petition incident to a paradigm of human rights issues. And this is universalization. I see many trying to show the world how good YuMenglong was, hoping to move others through overflowing emotions. This actually hinders the pursuit of justice. The current influence of this case in the Chinese community is merely extremely deep but not wide enough. Within the existing framework of entertainment logic, secular rules, and even geopolitics, YuMenglong case is reaching its ceiling. So I won't follow the logic of a fan to cry out, nor will I talk about the conspiracies in the way of democratic personages. Instead, I will try to redefine this matter. Just as Jesus was not received in his hometown, the value of YuMenglong may need to be ultimately confirmed by the Gentiles. His influence should not be less than that of CharlieKirk. If you found my words reasonable and worth hearing, please like, comment, and share my content. YuMenglong was a celebrity in China. He passed away 3 months ago. I actually learned about his death shortly after it got reported. At the time, I felt shocked and regretful, but not heartbroken. I had always known of this actor and was once stunned by his appearance, but I didn't know him very well. I once thought he was just another boring celebrity in the mainland entertainment industry. YuMenglong and CharlieKirk left this world at almost the same time. I was more familiar with CharlieKirk. I cried for 2 weeks after he was assassinated. In fact, it became the last straw that led me to leave my previous church, so my attention was fixed there. Over the next 2 months, though I followed the progress of the YuMenglong case, it felt unrelated to my life. Even when I learned he was polite, loving, I wasn't particularly moved. As a Christian, my understanding of original sin told me he couldn't be perfect. It wasn't until November that I cried for the first time because of this case. But I wasn't crying for the deceased himself. I cried because I suddenly saw his photos. He was in the traditional Asian costume, and I heard his songs. In that moment, I was crying for China, because China feels exactly like the YuMenglong case to me. A sense of pure, elegant, and jade-like integrity being smashed and dragged into the mud. In the book of Genesis, after the fall, the first human voice I received a response from God was not a prayer or worship, but the cry of the first innocent victim, Abel. God said to the murderer Cain, "The voice of your brother's blood cries out to me from the ground." Then God cursed Cain, specifically cursing his relationship with the land. So a person's death reveals the corruption and curse of the entire land. In China, there is countless innocent blood, countless voices crying out from the ground. I know these victims were not flawless, just as Jesus knew Israel was sinful and cursed. Yet he wept over Jerusalem, saying, "If only you had known on this day what would bring you peace." My feelings for China are that kind of "if only you had known" lamentation. At that time, I began conceptualizing my third book. I wanted to write about how a cursed nation struggles and thirsts for revelation amidst broken poetry and painful memories. In a civilization without the Bible, our tears, aesthetics, poetry, and grief are all forms of unconscious prayer. Such prayers may not be directed towards a correct God, but they are open towards the divine. Therefore, China's classical beauty and poetic sadness can be read as a blind cry of fallen man toward God. I thought that after finishing my two theological works, I would write this book and dedicate it to YuMenglong. But since December, I started seeing short videos of YuMenglong and even searched almost all his material since his debut. After truly understanding him in detail, I finally began to cry for him as a person. I realized I was wrong. He was not a fallen man in the usual sense, but a person as pure as a child. This completely shattered my Christian common sense. He was too perfect. Kind, gentle, resilient, smart. These were no longer abstract adjectives. He was a child of the kingdom. He hadn't been polluted by this world. How is that possible in a cursed land like China? Especially as a man, his purity meant he lacked political artifice. It meant he could not protect himself in a hierarchical society, which means being easily hurt. Being continuously hurt means becoming purer and more transparent, but also more fragile and short lived. Yet he lived as a celebrity in the entertainment industry of such an utilitarian country without being distorted. It is staggering. I realized then that the existence of such a person is an undeniable miracle, and when the purest person in a civilization is devoured by darkness in the most tragic way, it is in itself a powerful revelation, powerful enough to reshape the nation. So I realized that besides weeping and interceding for my country, I must take on the task of translation. I need to translate what happened into theological language and write it down. I wanted to wait, but my grief grew daily, even causing physical chest pain at night. So I must do something for him right now. Meanwhile, I noticed many problems in the movement seeking justice for YuMenglong. I realized theological language cannot wait. It must be spoken now to help the movement correctly. If language is occupied by the wrong forces, this cry will likely be wasted again. So I set aside my original writing plans. This is why I started this podcast. I am not an influential figure. I just saw things that others haven't yet understood, so I must speak my insights. The first episode of my podcast is to reveal the most powerful yet overlooked aspect of this case, martyrdom. On September 21st, at CharlieKirk's memorial service, President Trump said in the first paragraph of his speech, his death was not an accident. It was not the death of an ordinary man, but a martyrdom. And I want to say, YuMenglong's death was also a martyrdom. First, let me clarify, because the truth of the YuMenglong case remains blurred. No matter how much evidence is online, I cannot state any unconfirmed narratives of deceased as factual martyrdom. My role is a translator, not an investigator. I am not offering factual verification, but an interpretation of cultural and theological meaning. One thing modern Westerners have gradually forgotten is that Western civilization became a great river because for thousands of years, generations of prophets and martyrs followed one another, being strong and courageous, never giving up. In the Old Testament, prophets often spoke truth within a corrupt system, bringing God's proclamation and being rejected or even killed by society. In the New Testament, this martyrdom was further theologized as bearing witness. The early church realized that martyrdom is not a failure, but the supreme witness of light shining in the darkness. As Tertullian said, the blood of the martyrs is the seed of the church. Later, thinkers like Aquinas defined the ethics of courage, suggesting that the Christian tradition of martyrdom is the most stable and ultimate definition of courage, because it points towards the most stable and the ultimate end, God. In the 16th century, Fox's Book of Martyrs became the milestone in Protestant history. The Church of England distributed this book to all churches so that everyone could read it. Churchill once said that generations of Englishmen learned the tragic stories of noble subjects from this book, and their martyrdom paved the path of faith for the indifferent. Because of this Book of Martyrs, Puritans understood that judicial justice is the foundation of religious freedom, which later influenced the U.S. Constitution, especially the 4th through 8th Amendment. So in the Christian tradition, martyrdom has a history-shaping power. CharlieKirk is a martyr of our time. His martyrdom illuminated the darkness of the age and inspired more young people to fight for the truth. God bless America. He used CharlieKirk to awaken the Western tradition of martyrdom. This is also what I have always understood martyrdom to be. But after learning about YuMenglong, I understood that God also deeply loved China. Therefore, he gave a miraculously pure person to a stubborn and rebellious nation. YuMenglong thus became the most prominent innocent blood in a country without a tradition of martyrdom. For thousands of years, China has lacked the consciousness of innocent blood shaping history. Although many Christians have been martyred in China, they never entered the mainstream cultural vision. Confucius said, if a man hears the Tao in the morning, he could die in the evening without regret. The difference is that the Western Tao is a clear word of God. One does not die to hear it, but to witness to it. In Chinese culture, the Tao is a blurred backdrop for performing morality. We have loyalty officials and martyrs for the state. We view them as heroes shaping history, but we have never truly understood the power of the suffering of the innocent. Traditional Chinese culture often tells of loyalty and self-sacrifice, sacrificing one's life for the country, enduring hardships to achieve great things, and individuals dying for the greater cause. This is a complete set of aesthetics of the strong. What has been emphasized is social harmony and order. It cannot understand the righteous person who suffers for no reason. It often tends to think the victim must have a problem, attributing it to faith, karma, ethical obligation, or lack of strength. The Book of Job, the earliest book of the Bible, explores exactly this, the righteous person suffering for no reason. Our culture has no Abel, no Job, no suffering servant. Consequently, we have no God who defends and vindicates the innocent. So we believe in enforcing justice on behalf of heaven, which often leads to slaughter and totalitarianism. Because China has lacked this martyrdom consciousness for millennia, the mourning phenomenon following YuMenglong's death appears so shocking, so strange and intense. Netizens call him a hero, a saint, a son of light, or a bodhisattva, celestial being. This is not just a fan behavior. It is because Chinese culture lacks the language for an innocent death, so we can only rely on traditional culture and supernatural terms. This is actually an important module that is missing in this entire civilization. So my first task is to rectify YuMenglong's name. Compared to President Trump, my voice is insignificant. But I must say, YuMenglong's death was not an ordinary death, nor was it karma or an immortal undergoing tribulations. It was a martyrdom. So what's the difference between CharlieKirk's martyrdom and YuMenglong's martyrdom? My following analysis is the focus of this episode. You may discover an astonishing divine will behind it. First, I need to introduce two core patterns of martyrdom, the prophet and the lamb. The martyrs in the Bible can roughly be condensed into two types. The first type is the prophet-like martyrs. There are many representative figures in the Old Testament, such as Zechariah, Jeremiah, as well as Amos, Micah, and Elijah. In the New Testament, this tradition is continued by John the Baptist and all the apostles who died for spreading the gospel. They all speak truth to power, expose evil, and point out sin. Their word causes anger and brings confrontational death. They die like warriors because they do not fear violence. Their martyrdom is understood by the public as standing with God, speaking for God. CharlieKirk belongs to this category. In an age of political correctness and information pollution, he was one of the few willing to speak unpopular truth. He wasn't a saint, but he was a warrior. His death weakens moral courage because it is an existing Western tradition. From Moses, Elijah, Paul to the patristic era, reformers, Puritans, and later public theologians such as Bonhoeffer and Martin Luther King. This tradition is very good at confrontation. It can clearly identify and name evil, say no to power, and pay the price. It excels at establishing systems and structural injustice. This is the flame of truth. However, this is not what the East excels at. Although China has had hundreds of peasant uprisings in history, constantly overthrowing and changing dynasties, the essence of the East has never been confrontation. As native Chinese, we learn ancient poetry since childhood. I truly love the classical aesthetics of China. Even shortly after I was saved by Christ, while I was drawn to the cross, I was also deeply attached to that unsaved beauty, that light in classical culture that is filled with sadness, purity, tenderness, loneliness, and the ultimate ideal of humanity. So what the East possesses is not the flame of truth, but the tears of compassion. Eastern culture, especially Han culture, is top-notch in the world in terms of emotional perception. Its talent lies in its extremely delicate and gentle emotions, as well as its high sensitivity to the beauty of brokenness. This is actually a deep affection for the image of God. After YuMenglong's death drew international attention, I saw comments from all over the world under many videos condemning this country for being cruel and cold-blooded. I completely agree with this statement, but what many foreign friends don't know is that YuMenglong is from Xinjiang, but has no Uyghur blood. If he had Uyghur blood, he would at least still have value in the unit front work for CCP, and he would not have died a tragic death. His parents are from Jiangsu province. When they were young, they responded to the government's call and went to Xinjiang to support construction, which is why Menglong was born in Xinjiang. His ancestral home is actually Jiangsu province, and Jiangsu is widely recognized as a place of classical elegance in China, where there is the most refined, delicate, and poetic styles in traditional Chinese aesthetics. The ancient images that YuMenglong himself had portrayed and the songs he had sung all express this classical beauty. So I sincerely hope that netizens from all countries can hear the deepest cry of this nation from him. It is a kind of indescribable wailing from the softest, clearest, and most delicate part of a civilization. Just as CharlieKirk's bravery, clarity, and truth-telling can awaken the faith in the West, YuMenglong's purity, his undistorted integrity, and crushed tenderness also hit the most painful spot of Eastern culture. But the problem is, while we excel at feeling and pity, and have long possessed the ability to cry for the innocent, we have been robbed of the theological structure that allows innocent blood to cry out to God. For thousands of years, our sorrow is not a voice to a God who can be called upon and responded to, but rather an internal digestion of fate, the impermanence of the world, and the cycle of karma. Therefore, it can only become aesthetics, not judgment. We do not know that the core of an innocent death is not death, but accusation. In Genesis, God says, "The blood cries out to me." So the blood is not to be pacified or ritually released, which means 超度, but to speak to God. This implies at least three premises. First, God is personal. Second, innocent blood has a judicial position. Third, history can be interrogated. Without these 3 points, martyrdom would be impossible. However, the Eastern culture is precisely lacking in these 3 points. The creator in our minds is not a person, but rather the way of heaven, nature, reincarnation, and impermanence. We cannot accuse anything, but can only sigh. And the innocence has no judicial position. There is only pity, tragedy. We can only sympathize but not seek justice. Our history is not a court, but a void where right and wrong, success and failure all turn to nothing. There is no ultimate judgment, only seeing through and letting go. The result is that the settlers in the East is extremely beautiful, but also extremely powerless. So when the YuMenglong case aroused a great deal of compassion in the Chinese community, although people began to cry out for justice to the heavens, we also witnessed all kinds of contradictory phenomena. While we are in pursuit of the truth, we are also spreading mysterious narratives about past lives. While we were seeking judicial justice, we were running towards temples, performing rituals, and burning paper money. While we are promoting a petition, hoping that international human rights organizations can get involved, we are also deifying this person with various names. I don't want to say that China or our Chinese community has not yet transitioned from barbarism to modern civilization. In fact, it is a civilization without martyrdom language. And when facing truly innocent blood, people habitually uses the methods that have been used for thousands of years to evade or console themselves. But this time, we really can't do this again. Because YuMenglong was too unique, he was too beautiful, too good, and his death was too tragic. We have no excuse to evade our responsibility towards such an unparalleled innocent person anymore. We must seek justice for him. This is the first time that this nation has collectively sought justice for an innocent person. I hope this will also be the first time that our Eastern civilization has collectively understood that softness is not wrong, purity is not naivety, and the death of an innocent person can awaken humanity far more than loyalty and national heroes. For the first time, a country without the concept of innocent righteous people collectively touch upon the theology of the innocent. This will be a tsunami level change, and this is the light of the Lamb Martyr. If CharlieKirk is a prophet martyr, then YuMenglong is another kind of martyr in the Bible. Gentle, pure, non-aggressive, suffering but not hardened, not complaining, not debating, as tamed as a lamb, yet treated harshly by this world. He did not take the initiative to challenge any structure, but was regarded as a threat merely because of the existence itself. He was the Abel who passively endured violence, and also the young Isaac who was offered up. He was the most poetic, vulnerable, and purest kind of existence in the Old Testament, a righteous person who suffered, a lamb that was clearly tender yet bore unbearable pain. A prophet martyr like CharlieKirk moves us because he was ready to die for the truth. A lamb martyr like YuMenglong breaks our heart because he should have been protected and treated with tenderness. Therefore, the suffering of the lamb pierces the soul more than the death of the prophet. It also better awakens people's yearning for justice. That's why I said that YuMenglong's influence should not be lower than that of CharlieKirk. However, CharlieKirk died in broad daylight. In the crowd, it was quickly exposed by global media, triggering global shock and intense public discussion, as well as various political actions. YuMenglong, however, died a tragic death in the dark light. To this day, the Chinese people are still being silenced, waiting for the truth. 3 months have passed, and the only online petition is still far from reaching 1 million signatures, and we still don't know if this petition will be of any use. CharlieKirk was in an open society, the United States. People have the freedom of assembly and speech, and the media can continuously track and discuss. YuMenglong died in a totalitarian society. The authorities block information, show zero tolerance for assembly. They are highly vigilant against symbolic features and strangling any public mourning. None of us is willing to accept it, but this is reality. We cannot expect a society that has long been depublic to suddenly act like a mature civil society. But what I, as a Christian, can do is at least prepare the language and the meaning for the next step. CharlieKirk was able to have a rapid global impact because he had a very clear public identity and ideological stance. He was an important opinion leader. His death could directly enter an already existing narrative. Freedom of speech, political violence, beliefs, value conflict, and the self-examination of Western democracy. The Western world knows how to understand this matter. Thus, his influence flows with the wind. Western media, independent creators, and politicians actively tap into his visibility, converting it into immediate political momentum. The case of YuMenglong, however, joins no such luxury. His visibility has been suppressed. We are currently at a nascent stage of transitioning from internal Chinese modeling to global human rights concern. For the non-Chinese world to even perceive this case, it requires complex translation, so the friction is immense. The insider information we currently hold likely involves money laundering, organ removal, detention, and torture. These are egregious crimes, yet they risk being dismissed by Western society as merely internal affairs of a foreign state. But I must say, if the world views the case solely as a Chinese injustice, Western civilization will miss the profound value of the Lamb Martyr. Today, the West is trapped in a crisis of compassion because it doesn't know how to pity correctly. Compassion in the far left context has often degenerated into a condescending moral posture. It is incredibly cheap. Empathy has become political correctness, victims have been reduced to labels and tools, and tears have been commodified as identity capital. In this overflowing yet hollow pity, the individuals vanish, the specific raw pain is smoothed over. Those sympathizers do not wish to weep with those who weep, they only want to take a side. Meanwhile, Western conservatives, harboring an absolute skepticism of human nature, have grown increasingly hardened in their response to the cultural war. They sometimes lack the gentle humanity of Christ. In contrast, the unique gift of the East lies in a lamentation that is delicate to the bone, a deep, empathetic sorrow. We understand the beauty of the broken. Therefore, the West leads YuMenglong. It leads to understand his childlike kindness and gentleness, how he loved others and this world. His beauty is classical, beyond partisan bias, and intensely personal. The agony of a life so miraculously pure, being brutally crushed, cannot be covered by any politically correct label. He forces us to confront a concrete, flesh and blood, heartbreaking human being. Thus, the case of YuMenglong is not begging for Western attention. It is a spiritual correction offered to Western civilization. The West does not know how to pity rightly, and the East does not know how to let tears enter the verdicts of history. Only when the Western structure of justice embraces the delicate tears of the East will compassion cease to be an arrogant handout. Instead, it will become a collective trembling of humanity before God. In the eyes of God, truth and mercy carry equal weight. But because CharlieKirk's influence currently far outweighs that of YuMenglong, we must speak all the more urgently for that silent lamb. As I have stated, I am a translator of culture and theology. For me, clarity and restraint are paramount. I strive to avoid conspiracy theories and mysticism. Yet, as a Christian, I definitely hold a supernatural worldview. I'm certain that behind the deaths of CharlieKirk and YuMenglong, a spiritual warfare is unfolding. Therefore, there are things I must say directly to the Church. On September 8th, a blood moon appeared in the sky. Since YuMenglong's death, China has witnessed various abnormal weather and supernatural phenomena. We do not know exactly what is happening in the spiritual realm, but we know that all things remain under the sovereignty of God. The exact time of CharlieKirk's assassination was 12:23 p.m. MDT on September 10th. He was pronounced dead an hour later. This corresponds to between 2 and 3 a.m. on September 11th Beijing time. As for YuMenglong, he endured days of inhumane torture. While his exact time of death remains unknown, official claims state that he returned to his room and locked the door at around 2 a.m. on September 11th. This timestamp was undoubtedly provided by those involved. So why 2 a.m.? Could that be the exact moment the perpetrator confirmed his death? If this is true, it means the death of CharlieKirk and YuMenglong happened simultaneously. Before the inscrutable will of God, we must sometimes rely on spiritual intuition rather than evidence. I am not here to deduce a chain of causality, nor am I in a position to do so. I'm here to reveal a symbolic structure. The prophet who speaks truth and challenges corruption, and the lamb who bears evil and is staying in innocence, both found their ultimate convergence in Jesus Christ. Only Christ is both prophet and lamb. In the book of Revelation, only the lamb that was slain is worthy to open the scroll of history. We do not know the full mystery of the spiritual realm, but we can see that at that specific moment in time, the two pillars of the cross were split across opposite ends of the world. The martyrdom of the prophet and the lamb unfolded a storm within the collective souls of the West and the East. I'm but an ordinary Christian. I have no authority to declare this as a direct revelation from God. That is for the Church to discern over time. However, if the death of CharlieKirk and YuMenglong can truly be explained by Christ, then their simultaneous death creates a symbolic tension that cannot be ignored. The universal church must respond. CharlieKirk was a Christian, embedded in the ecclesial networks and Western tradition of martyrdom. The church recognized him easily. But YuMenglong, even if he came from a nation that persecutes Christianity, even if he was not a Christian himself, the church must receive him. Indeed, only the church has the spiritual capacity to truly receive him. In fact, all my words are a translation for the church. I want the cry of the East to enter the conscience of the church. Our Eastern civilization is not naturally adept at justice. In South Korea's Gwangju uprising, Christianity played a pivotal moral and humanitarian role, becoming the pillar of the democratic movement. The key event in Japan's post-war democratization was the drafting of the constitution led by General Douglas MacArthur, whose Christian faith provided the invisible scaffolding for Japan's basic law. In Taiwan, Christianity helped transform an authoritarian island into a lighthouse of democracy in Asia. I don't know how the church will shape history this time, as a lamb is martyred in China. I only know that a cry for justice that receives no answer will eventually exhaust its strength, and the tears of mercy will eventually grow cold. Under a video seeking justice for YuMenglong, there was a top-rated comment that said, "If the death of YuMenglong cannot call back the courage and conscience of the Chinese people, the entire nation will go to hell." To that I would add, if YuMenglong does not receive justice, the universal church will have to render a heavy account before God. This concludes my first episode for YuMenglong. As I mentioned, I originally intended to write a book for him. Although I have shared much today, there is much to say, which I will cover in future episodes. I don't know if these reflections will be understood. There may be a barrier to comprehension. I don't even know if these thoughts will be heard by the world at large. But I will persist until this series is complete. because everything I do is not about me, it's about the Lamb I love. May we not only weep, but stand to witness for justice. Amen.